This is Mark Boatwright Frost from Resilient Ecosystems. My co host Marwan Cameron is having some technical issues and will be on a little bit later. But today we're going to be doing a presentation for you that I'm actually in the process of building, considering it's a work in progress. And of course, the technology of this is always a little challenging to me. So I'm going to see if I can share screen and make this happen. So bear with me for a minute. Okay, that's not it. There it is. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can get this to work. There we are. Okay. Terry says she can't hear me, so hold on just a moment. Let's see if I've got my mic. No, my mic isn't on mute. Terry, can you still not hear me? Okay. Let's see what we got going on here. Okay, so she can hear me now. Just a little bit of a delay there. All right, so let me see if I can get this share screen going here. Any more technical issues? So, without any more technical issues, so let me bring this up and see if I can make that. No, it's not it. There we go. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to check with Terry to make sure she can actually see the slide, and I'm going to quickly go back to the presentation part of it. So I need to go back to the first slide, and there we are. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is community for all. And as I mentioned in chat, what does that even mean? Oh, Marwan's on now.
Hey.
Hey, and I can hear you. Can everybody else hear Marwan?
They should be able to.
Okay, darn it. I mean, good for everybody. Okay, so we're going to talk about community for all and what that means to be connected, informed, engaged in human and having human communities, and what we can do to get there. And so let me roll along with this. As I said, it's in development, so there are going to be some glitches. I'm going to probably trip up because I keep changing it and I have to figure out where I'm at. So let's rock and roll. Land of confusion, communication or not. When we talk today, it's like the old game of Pong. We think we know what we're saying, we think we know what the other person is hearing, but are they hearing what we think we're saying, or are they hearing something else? We have, the more complex something gets, the harder it is to make sure that you actually have a solid hit on the paddle, and the harder it is to make sure that the other person is with you. And we have a lot of communication here, and there's a lot of examples of this. But what this really means is that we all have different experiences. We have different ways of hearing things. We have different ways of understanding things. So we have to learn how to double check with the other person to make sure that we all are on the same page here and that we're all hearing the same thing. So frequently you'll hear me ask when I'm in a conversation and I get a look or a response that doesn't mesh with what I'm thinking I'm saying. And I'll say, what did you hear me say? And I'm not being smart. I want to know what you heard so that I know how to readjust to actually communicate. And that's the world we live in today. And let's talk a little bit about the reason why. We can't even agree on a definition of community. It means a lot of different things. And community is just one word. We could use any number of words and find that we're in the same predicament. We don't have a common understanding of a word. How do we have a common understanding when we're talking to each other? So it's going to take a little extra from us to make sure that what we're saying is what's being heard. And Marwan, does that make sense to you?
It does. And I think a piece of it that's missing is people can generalize in a more, uh, I guess, esoteric way of what community is, but they don't often talk about the social contract of what that community, how it's supposed to behave and how people are supposed to interact within that community. That makes sense?
Right. And that means that they can't come to an agreement on what a community is. And so I'd say that, building community doesn't start at the church. Building community starts at a conversation with what community means.
Mm.
And I'm only using church as an example because churches are the place that promote community within the church. So that's the most commonly known one. And again, I'm willing to be called out on that. But to my understanding, when people talk, I go to church because of the community. So starting with understanding community might change your view of what that is and or make you more engaged in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so problem with words and meaning. I have not ever passed a college level English class. I've dropped out of 4 of them. And yet I'm a published writer and I write very well. The problem is that predominantly, and I'm not going to say all, but predominantly English teachers lie. They tell you there are rules. There are no rules in English. It's a living language. It changes all the time. It changes frequently. And we just talked about how words, we don't even have agreements on the same words. How can we say that there are rules around that? What there are guidelines within the language. And they're agreed upon guidelines, but we don't agree on everything. We don't even talk about everything. We just assume that someone's going to understand this. So, we have this confused chaos that we call language that we have partial agreements on, and that makes it very difficult for us to actually communicate. So we have to step back and learn how to not so much put the dots in the right places or cross the T's and whatever else. We need to actually make sure that people are understanding what we're saying.
Can I push back on that just a little?
Sure.
Just, as a former educator, it just lie is such a strong word,
Actually, I got that from an English teacher.
Oh God. So, and what I mean by that is, yes, you're right. It is a living language that is ever changing, right? We add words to our dictionary, our urban dictionary, every year.
Webster's every year.
But when we're thinking about education and teaching, right? We're asking the students to be intellectually honest in that, yes, it may be a living and moving language. However, we need to teach you from the scaffolding that the majority of people, at least academically, are saying that we agree with, to teach the premise so people understand, right? Because what you end up having is folks in class saying, well, that's not always true, and this and that, and some of those things are the exception that prove the rule. Some things aren't perfect, but we're trying to teach the masses.
Which is why I say they're guidelines, not rules.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that they're rules or you are being dishonest. But yes, I had an English teacher friend of mine who said, the reason you have so much trouble with English is because you write in a specific way that is very conversational.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't fit within the rules they teach you, but there aren't any real rules because they lie to you.
Wow.
So that, and that was from an English teacher. So moving on to the next thing is now to add to that confusion and chaos, words get co-opted all the time to dilute their meaning and create confusion and disagreement, because it is in someone's best interest to make sure that we don't rally around an idea, and words communicate ideas. So we are taught a a range of ways of stopping conversation and stopping movement when it does not suit our goal, even though it might suit a larger goal. And so we co opt words, we dilute their meaning, we use them in inappropriate ways, we make them less than they are. And so forth, the idea does not get communicated and everything comes to a screeching halt.
And we see
And
that politically, right?
we see it all the time politically, but we also see it in corporations. The word sustainable. First of all, I've always disagreed with the word sustainable, and I want to be honest about that. Because sustainable is just to sustain. It's not really to grow or to change. It's just getting by. And I don't think we need to be just getting by. I think we need to be creating an area where we thrive, where we are resilient, where we can actually create capacity. But again, the idea of that gets diluted because capacity suddenly means corporate profit and profit for the few and all of the rest of the stuff. When what I'm really talking about is everybody needs to live, everybody needs to have shelter, everybody needs to have food, everybody needs to have health care, everybody needs to have education, everybody has to have access to clean water, and everybody needs to be educated to a place where they can fulfill their own drive to the highest level that they can possibly do. And we need to support them to do that. And to me, that's creating capacity. That's creating capacity to change the broken things in our world. But that's what I use, and sustain doesn't really do that for me. Resilience does. So, but even the word sustain and sustainable have been so diluted as to be meaningless. From believing it's just a greeny thing that is meaningless to any other number of ways to say that. Hold on, what was just came through? Well, oh, Tamika. Okay. Hey. So there are lots of ways that we end up in disagreements for things that we would probably agree on if we could just make sure that we're hearing the same thing. And I am going to do a little trigger alert here and rant.
Of course you are.
One of the things, and this isn't really about that, but one of the things that makes me crazy, and I was thinking about this just before the podcast, is this whole cancel culture thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we talk about here is we the people, and I've heard more than once from people. Well, the people who framed the Constitution were slave owners, and therefore nothing they had to say was meaningful. And I've seen this posted on the internet and Facebook, and the I have to tell people to write that without the context of the time. It is meaningless in its of self. And when you write things like that, people who think you're an idiot and wish you'd stop writing. And it's just like you have to have communication in context, and that's what I'm saying here all the way through this.
But what people? Because they're
because of the anonymity of the internet.
But I'm going to speak in code here because they definitely push you down in the algorithm for saying his name out loud. But if someone is making an objective observation on the leadership style of Mustache Man, right?
Okay.
Folks will say you can't say anything positive about him because of that, right? So I could juxtapose that to our forefathers and looking at it from a slavery context and people saying, hey, well, we can't say they did anything because they owned slaves, right? They didn't do anything good because they had slaves, right? So we can't step outside and say, hey, what made Mustache Man so effective in this or that? How did he rally the people? How in some ways could you compare Mustache Man with Obama in terms of charisma, right? You can't have that conversation because that's instant cancel.
Exactly so. We have to provide context, which goes back to the whole thing about words and communication. We grab ideas and hold on to them like they are meaningful. And I have on the Kitsap Resiliency Project page a chart that we looked at last week about basically how we have biases. And we need to work on the biases so that we can actually communicate with each other. So this is starting out with this conversation, because the rest of the conversation about this community becomes a lot easier if we know that that our own language and our culture trap us into roles and understandings that prevent us from actually easily coming together, and the understanding that we have to find ways to unlearn and relearn how to communicate with each other. All right. So we the people. Now you understand why I was having the we the people conversation before this. We the people are the power of change. We are. First three words of the Constitution. We the people. And we the people aren't we the people. We the people are so segmented and and in conflict and in fear that we don't talk to each other. We have this breakdown of our social structure in ways that no one ever saw coming. And while social media is a boon in connecting to people and things like COVID was almost like the last nail in the coffin to break down community and neighborhood and people getting together. People are still terrified to come out of their houses today, and are going to be for a while. So how do we make this? How do we more? Why do we need to make this difference now? And how do we make this difference now? And what difference is that? So let's continue on that. So, what is a connected community? It's a neighborhood where people talk to each other and work together. Something we don't really have much of these days, but Marwan and I work tirelessly trying to reconnect that. Why would you want to do a connected neighborhood? Well, there are a lot of discussions around food. Georgia lost 95% of their peaches this year. 95%. Chihuahua, Mexico, 20 years ago, started losing up to 80% of their agriculture and had an outmigration that caused a crisis in Juarez. All of these things are connected. All of these things are things that affect all of us. California is struggling with their agriculture season. Climate change is changing everything. And we have been changing everything for decades and decades with our industrial farming. And we're eroding the soil. So very soon, growing is going to become a real issue, and shelves are going to become empty. Prices are going to continue to skyrocket. And, I think everybody kind of likes food on their table. I do. I certainly love to cook. So it's good to have things. And having things that and not being able to get things that I need to cook or feed my family are going to put a lot of stressors on me and my whole community. So let's start with food. How do we have a conversation with our neighbors that doesn't devolve into politics or religion or social status or any other thousand ways we can basically disconnect from each other? We start talking about things that we need as humans to survive: food, water. Are you there, Cameron? Marwan, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, because I just had something beep in my ear. All right. So where are we at now?
I was just showing everyone your article there.
Oh. Okay, about the peaches? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and all of this is, if you hear us say something, we've researched it, we can provide you with source material. Trust me. And if you go to our webpage, there's lots of source material.
Actually, don't trust them. Do your own research.
That
Back it up.
too. That too. Absolutely. I do your own research as well. It's all out there. All you have to do is Google a little bit. Why did that sound dirty? Anyway, it tells you where my head's at. So having a conversation about things like food, starting a community garden in someone's front yard or many people's front yard in your neighborhood, everybody helping a little bit, not even everybody, just a few people starting to help a little bit, and people start getting food and fruit and vegetables from the garden. That is a way of starting to work together and overcome those dissonances, that cognitive dissonances we have about communication, and getting by the politics and all of the rest of it. But again, why would you want to do that? Well, because you can build layers on top of that. You have a network neighborhood, then you can build network communities in multiple neighborhoods, and then you can do grassroots change. Because I think all of us can agree that things don't work well for us. So you start with a neighborhood, and then you put representative from your neighborhood who has gone through a process of consensus and setting of priorities. They go to a group of multiple neighborhoods, all who have done the same work, and they start going through a second round of consensus and priorities. And you're reporting back to your neighbors, and they're talking to each other and reporting back to their neighbors. And you come up with a list of like the top 5 things you guys need to do to change things outside of your neighborhood so that everybody thrives more. Okay. And then you look, it's a surprise, you suddenly have a grassroots network. Now, here's political math for you. If you need the politicians to do something for you, and you go into their office and say, I need this done, they go, uh huh. And then you leave the office and they go on to the next thing and don't even think about you again. That's not necessarily true, but you get the feeling of it. Um, but if 100 people go to the one office or a meeting and say that in a unified way, say this is what we need to have changed, we need this to be looked at, we need this to be addressed, and we suggest that these are the ways you can address it cost effectively for you, suddenly you have their attention. 1,000 people, you get change, because in Kitsap County 1,000 people can change an election, and that's just the truth.
You don't even
So
need 1,000.
no, you don't. And in your race, I was looking, it was like 369 voters so far.
That's it.
That's it. And there's that 369 people can change an election in the city of Bremerton. 150 people could. So grassroots is a real way of change. This is how we, the people, are supposed to work. Now, we've been taught that we go to our Congress people or representatives or our county commissioners, our city council people, and they're going to do it for us because we gave them an idea. It's not how it works. That they need a push, especially if they don't. It's not their area. I'm going to be nice here. Area of expertise, or they don't understand the parameters around what you're needing. Being able to present them in a way that helps them understand and gives them the impetus of voters in the next election, you can get a lot more stuff done. And that's how we, the people, work. And there's your lesson of civics for today. So puzzling it out, it's like the next step is now what? We've got to start this. How are we going to start this? Why should we start this? And so I'm going to kind of give you the thought here is that think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. You start with the edges and figure out how to connect the edges. And actually, Resilient Ecosystems has given you a good start on that. If you ask us to engage with you, we do it. We don't charge you for it. And we help you learn how to facilitate, how to unlearn some things, how to learn some things, and how to start engaging with people to determine what the picture in your neighborhood is going to be. And then from there, you pick what the picture in the community is going to be, what the picture in the city is going to be, what the picture in the county is going to be. And if more communities join into this, what the picture in the country is going to be. And we can change some amazing things together. And, we don't have to depend on polls. We just have to depend on talking to each other. And
Definitely agree with that.
And we're all part of the puzzle. Every one of us is a piece to this puzzle. And unless you bring your voice and yourself to the table with your points of view and you learn how to communicate with each other and ask each other what you mean so that you can get by the preconceived notions about what the other person's saying and your own filters, and you get to a place, I know this sounds like a lot of hard work, but once you practice it, it's really not. And if everybody starts practicing it in your neighborhood and you get to a place where you can communicate, it's a beautiful thing. And lots of good stuff can be done. And you'll find you really have a better quality of life and you have a lot more comfort and security because you and your neighbors are working together.
Well, what makes it so difficult is the powers that be make it so difficult for folks to engage and to trust, right? They sow all of this distrust. They say, hey, you're so far apart on so many issues that you couldn't dare talk to your neighbor or create community, because that's kind of the word of the day today. And so folks are resistant, right? And once they are programmed, right, from watching the news, watching even our entertainment, right, they're getting bombarded with these messages over and over and over again. You can't trust, don't talk to this person is against you. Then we lock our doors, we shut our shades, and we keep to ourselves, right? And we don't build. But if you just step back and you listen, right? And if you really try to pick through the BS of it, people are all saying the same thing, right?
Yeah, they
They
are.
want health, they want safety, they want their families, they want their children to thrive and be resilient, right? They want to be able to live in peace, pursue the things that they want to pursue. Everyone is saying the same thing in that regard, but there's so much garbage that's in between it that we start believing our own BS, right?
Yep.
And then we perpetuate it. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what echo chamber you're in, not to mention, social media and how the algorithm, basically parrots back to you what it is that you're searching for, right? So it's
You
not
look at
really
one thing negative and you're going to get flooded with it.
right.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I'm going to say here, because we're kind of like at the moving into the really real communication thing, is we are taught many tricks of how to stop an idea from forming, and we talked about that in communication. I'm going to talk about it a little more now. One of our board members was talking to somebody about the whole idea of having all of our basic needs met, and the first question out of their mouth was, "How are we going to pay for this? And how's it going to get paid for?" Well, okay, it sounds like a reasonable question, okay? But when an idea starts, you don't always know the answers to everything. You have some ideas, so that question's kind of irrelevant at this point. It's designed to stop the conversation. It sounds rational, it seems reasonable, but there's no answer for it. There's no way to say, oh, well, we've thought everything else out, and this is how everything's going to happen, because if we'd have done that, it would already be done. It's a
Right.
process. And so when somebody asks a question like that, we can just say, okay, so I understand your question and I understand the relevance of that in the whole picture, but it's not a question that could be answered at the beginning. It's a question that can be answered as the process moves forward. And we are going to have to change some of the ways we approach things, Grassroots Network, in order to answer that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's tough because you're doing two things at once, right? It's a hurry up and wait approach, or slow down because you have to build, but at the same time, there's this urgency that we needed to have done this decades ago. So we have to move with purpose and intention, but we also have to give it time to build a relationship, right?
Right.
And
And
to
we
allow
and we all
correction.
have to roll up our sleeves and join.
Yeah,
We
right.
bring your piece to the table, because it's not going to happen without you.
Facts.
So so how do we do all of this? What we do is we look for community ambassadors. We look for people who are essentially a caring neighbor, who are driven to have a better life, who can see a bigger picture, have perspective. I'm going to have to look around my camera. Has buy-in, are willing to be trained, are willing to do the work, and willing to be persistent about it. Lots of people in our culture are excited and get excited to see change, and they go and do a march and nothing happens. Persistence is really the answer here, the continuity. And this is why we start with the neighborhood and build to the community and build to the grassroots networks, because you build consistency, you build continuity, you build persistence, you build will of the people through the process of building consensus. And you understand that it's a march that's going to take decades and generations to complete. And we start teaching our children to do the same thing. And that's how we work it.
And I think I've shared before, marching is obviously a tool. Terry says generational uh, work. It can be a tool, but I see it being ineffective because it's the same thing when people put the black square on social media, right? It's like, oh, I marched, so everything is going to change. That's one little thing, but that you really didn't take the action that's needed to facilitate the change.
No, you said something, and then you went back to your house, sat down, and watched the ball game,
Yeah.
and that's all that happened. And politicians are immune to that now. What they aren't immune to is 1,000 people saying this needs to happen. and we are going to keep at it, and we will replace you until we find somebody who will do the work.
Well, and here's the thing. If you end up tearing up, the things in your neighborhood, right? It's just a further setback.
Right.
So what did that actually do at the end of the day?
Set you back. But together you can move forward. And that's really the only way you can move forward. And I'm not a real big one right way person, but in this, it's human nature. We need to move forward together, which means we have to overcome the divisiveness that we have pumped at us 24/7. I don't even get a word for that.
How about I give you that?
Okay, there we go. All right. So, there's nothing but good that comes out of this. I mean, you grow food together, you break bread together, you learn each other, you start sharing skills. Somebody in your neighborhood knows how to do taxes, which none of us want to do. But you know how to work on a car. Her car needs work, so you work on her car, she does your taxes for you. Everybody comes ahead. Someone in your neighborhood has CPR training or is a medical professional. If bad things happen, it's nice to know who in your neighborhood you can rely on to help out. And everybody has a skill. This is just me scratching my head for 30 seconds to figure something out. But everybody has skills that they can share with each other. And the basis of that all it starts with the garden. Grow a garden. Be secure. Make sure you have food. Make sure that you guys talk about how to come together if something really bad happens. And don't say nothing really bad will ever happen. Look at what's happening all over the country. Washington State has been spared for a large part of it, but that doesn't mean we're always going to be spared. Last February, we had a 100-degree plus day. February. It's changing here too, and we need to be paying attention to it. One of the things that we need to pay attention to is the fact that we have so many water districts we can't count them, and nobody knows what the water tables in Kitsap County are doing, and we're all aquifer here.
Mm-hmm.
People want to bring in 500,000 more people. Do we have the water to support that? They're thinking about the money that represents. They're not thinking about the infrastructure needed and the knowledge needed to make sure we can even do that.
They are not.
And that's a political look at things, not a real look at things. So what's the hurry? Why now? Well, Cascadia Rising, that's a quake and tsunami that we're in the window of. And we need to start paying some serious attention to that because it happens every 250 or 450 years, and we're at 320 something, 323, almost 324 years. So that's a 9 magnitude quake that goes from South Vancouver Island, all the way to Crescent City, California. And it's going to wash out a lot of the ocean front. It's going to raise the water and throw a tsunami down the Puget Sound. It's going to take out a lot of Western Seattle. It's going to create power outages. And for Kitsap Peninsula, we're a peninsula. We're going to have real problem with getting food in here and things that we need in here. And power could be out for a very long time, according to FEMA. We have climate change. We're already seeing the impacts of that. We have been spared to a large degree some of the worst crises about storms and such in Washington State. But storms elsewhere create disruption in food and power and other things that we need because it all comes from somewhere else. We have environmental degradation. Again, soil is eroding, and soil health across the country is degrading. There are several studies actually, that say that we have lost 50% of the nutritional value of our food since the 1950s because of the way we grow food. And we're going to have depredation of resources. We're already stripping our resources bare and not the irreplaceable resources, lithium-ion batteries. God loves, lithium-ion batteries for your cell phone and for your laptop and for your car and everything else. But lithium is extremely rare. Not to mention that slave labor and child labor is used to get it in many of the countries where it is. But it is not a replaceable resource. So we need to start paying attention to these things because they're going to bite us in the butt sooner rather than later. And in some cases, they're already doing so, creating the domino effect. Dominoes are already cascading, and they're going to cascade faster. And while, again, Washington State has not felt the heavy impact of it, let's talk about climate refugees. People in Arizona who have 120, 130-degree days and it's going to get hotter, where do you think they're going to go when they can't live down there anymore? They're going to go to places that are less impacted. So we're going to get climate refugees here. It's a fact. And complaining about it all you want, but let's see what we can do about mitigating it and building capacity. And that's a discussion we have to have together.
Yeah, I definitely don't want that to happen here.
Well, it's going to. I mean, there's no escaping it. Climate refugees are going to be a thing. Okay, so this is kind of like a resilient future, and I was going to do two of these. One that shows not green in the upper corner quadrant, but red. But we can imply the red. Right now, I think we can agree, and I hope that I've made the case that we have a lot of confusion and inaction,
Right.
and nobody really knows what to do, and we're all looking to politicians and leadership to do that, and leadership and politicians aren't doing anything because they don't know what to do any more than we do because they're people. In the very near future, we're going to have cascading consequences in all kinds of ways we can't even think about: food shortages, climate refugees. If the heat continues to increase in Washington State, the way we build our homes is not going to be sustainable for people to live very well if we have more than, like, let's say 20 or 30 100-degree plus days, or even a month of 90 plus degrees days stresses us out. We can say, yeah, put air conditioners in the houses, but do we have the power to push those air conditioners? And remember, the power comes from somewhere else. And if Arizona's all turning on air conditioners and we happen to be on the same grid pull from that, the power's going to go there, not here. So we may have brownouts. And to tell you that can happen, I worked in Silicon Valley and I worked at Cisco Systems. And we were right next to a power station where my office was. And we had brownouts on a regular basis in the summer.
Well, and you're not even bringing up, the piece about how Washington State is hell bent on electrification of our vehicles here, and we don't have the infrastructure for it.
We don't. And most of the homes in Kitsap County are electric heating and electric air conditioning. And if everybody turned that on at the same time, we may not have power. I'm not saying we won't, but the infrastructure hasn't been upgraded since the 1960s. And the power companies aren't making the investments in infrastructure. And I will remind you that the Paradise Fire a couple of years ago was caused by a 90-year-old part that hadn't been maintained or changed. There was a hook holding a wire up. And that came down, and we lost $30 billion worth of homes and property and people's lives.
Wow.
So
I think our issue here, particularly in Washington State, is we don't experience the disasters of, the Southeast, the mid
Northeast too.
tornadoes.
Yeah, or the Northeast these days are getting hurricanes.
Right. Well, we don't have that experience, right? So we're like, it's not that bad. But when you go without power for days and weeks, man, it's a whole other thing.
Our power comes through Gorst. And Gorst is going to go through liquefaction in the Cascadia Rising event. And that means no power. And that could go on for months. So let's think about that for a minute. But the idea is not to scare you, but to say we can make the difference by coming together and demanding a different instrument. We have the technology. Germany is running almost 90% of their country off of renewable energy now. You talk to PSE, and I'm not calling PSE out specifically, all of the major power utilities will say the same thing. Oh, it's not mature enough. What they're actually saying is we don't want to make the investment. So we're going to have to push. And in order to push, we have to come together. So we're back to grassroots.
Let me ask you a question, right? We don't want to make the investment. Would it be fair to say that the United States has always had the money, seeing as somehow we're able to generate billions and billions of dollars for Ukraine and now Israel?
You know, well, we print our own money. I'll tell you what. I will answer that question on on the 90th episode, which is next week. We will talk about the economy and
Oh
the
man.
illusion of it.
Fine.
All right, so 5 to 10 years out, we're going to have planned or unplanned reaction to catastrophic consequences. Now we can start now to build capacity and relationships and the grassroots power to start changing some of the worst things that could come by putting power resources in place, by validating our water resources, by growing food locally, by doing all of these things, or we cannot, and we will be in a world of hurt. Now, our current model, and I put a picture on the Kids Up Resiliency Project page. I don't know if you've seen it, about a guy falling off of a building and he's sailing down from each floor and each floor, and and each floor he can be heard to say, "So far, so good." That's kind of our attitude on things. We can't have that attitude on these things and flourish. We can have that attitude and not flourish at all. So we have some choices to make now to mitigate the damage from 15 years from now. And in decades and generations, it's the difference between the existence of humanity on this planet and the lack of humanity on this planet. And that may seem really extreme to you, but it's a reality. We aren't going to thrive in a world of climate change, which is already here. We aren't going to stop it, but we can mitigate it and we can build the capacity to adapt to it. That's what we can do. And that all starts with you getting to know your neighbors. So all you need is each other, and you need to get out of your comfort zone and overcome your fear. Easy, right?
No. We've been working on it for a minute. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Tremendously difficult.
Isn't it amazing how we get in each other's way? Get in our own way. All right. So how much does it cost? Getting out of your comfort zone and embracing your humanity. Is that easy? Oh, hell no. What do you have to learn? It's more about what you have to unlearn and how you have to learn to connect and pay attention when you communicate to make sure that you are saying the same thing and hearing the same thing. And more importantly, you really need to learn how to listen so that you can hear nuance in what people are saying to see where you're misunderstanding what they are, because they may not know to ask if you're hearing what they think you're hearing. So you may have to go back and say, "Hey, this is what I'm hearing you say. Is that what you're saying?"
Mm.
And connect in that way so that you actually are starting to communicate with each other. And when they start getting frustrated, say, no, I don't mean to be frustrated. I think what you're saying is really, really important. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. So it's important to check back and forth to make sure that that's going on. And
What I
then,
would just say here, Mark,
yeah, go ahead.
just on that slide there, how much does it cost? I would say that it is far less inexpensive to build community, and it's far more expensive to the absence of it,
Yeah,
and not to pour into it and lean into it.
yeah, and not to mention, community equals security. Somebody's got your back,
Hmm.
and that's vital in this day and age. So you need to embrace your community and you need to embrace your humanity. And here's the good news: we're wired for community. It's all the messaging that screws up that wiring. We just need to clear that stuff out of the way. And I will gladly say I stole the "How did we manage to make" comment from the newsroom, which was written by Aaron Sorkin, who did West Wing and several other great shows. He has a way of turning a phrase that's beautiful. And it's like, how do we make the world a better place? We just decided to do it. So
That's how
I'm
G2
asking,
got here.
huh?
That's how G2 got here.
Yeah, you just decided to do it. That's how resilient ecosystems got here.
Hmm.
So we are asking you to decide to do something different. And there you are. We have moved our meet and greets to Sundays at 10 o'clock
Really?
because I am working on Saturdays now.
Oh, I need to update the information there.
Yep. And for those of you who follow our calendar on the Resilient Ecosystem ResEcho page, we are doing a board meeting on Sunday at 2 o'clock at the West Side Improvement Center. And we are talking to them about working with us and partnering with us so that we will be hosting events there.
And that's this Sunday?
This Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Gotcha. Okay. And are you doing an open invitation for people to come and be a
No,
part of
if they want to come and sit down, there's nothing we talk about that isn't open. But
Gotcha.
it's predominantly for the board. But we let people know where we're at because we believe in transparency.
Gotcha. Okay. Is their kitchen going to be open?
Not at 2 o'clock. No, but
I would say more often or
more often than
are
not.
they
Yeah,
going to have decent coffee?
yeah. I will bring a box of coffee with me.
Okay.
I will just be coming from cups, so you know.
That's what I'm saying. You know, it was at Cup, so
yeah. So we
kind
will
of
be
spoiled
having that there.
in that way.
Yeah. So we're just trying to put our foot in the door. We have just become Resilient Ecosystems has just become a member of Westside Improvement Club, which gives us the right to have meetings there. And we are talking about doing our Stone Soup event there. So
Nice.
and this was originally presented to them on Monday.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. I love hearing stuff like that.
Yep. So that is this. And let me unshare my screen now. And we're back.
We're back. And let me change it.
Yeah, because there we go. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it's really appropriate, especially with the election being yesterday, right?
Yep.
And part of that is trying to build community, and that is exceedingly difficult to do. Definitely a lot of learned lessons on, what to do to try to build even more community. And one thing is to try to build it earlier, right? But I didn't know
Right.
what I was going to do at the time. But it is difficult, and you have to continue to work at it and don't give up. And there are a solid core. I wish I could. I probably need to get permission to read some of the statements that were sent to me. But someone sent a really powerful email to me this morning. Let me see if I can read it without it revealing who they are. And that really spoke to the whole thing of community. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. I think it's super appropriate for our conversation here.
Okay. While you're doing that, Tomitka, you said "geez," and I was busy doing the presentation. I wasn't paying that much attention. Was there a specific thing that you were like questioning? I'd love to know
I
because
think it was during the peaches thing.
Oh, okay. Could make a really bad pun and say I was really fuzzy on that. No, but yeah.
So this person wrote to me this morning and said, I say this without any of my usual sarcasm, pathos, or bitterness. Last night, I stood with people who were alive and working toward new lives because of you. I realized how proud I am of the work with two individuals and another person, and the people of Rock the Block watching them realized they had been accepted into a family. It was like watching people open their eyes for the first time to see the world as it is and as it might be. I was also proud to stand with you last night. Your work has touched so many, sir. And as I said a few weeks ago, I'm not sure that getting a little slice of city council was going to bring much more than additional pools of your time and an article in the Kitsap Sun. If you want to run again for D4 or county, whatever, let me know, and you can have my full support and participation if you want it. If you decide to put political office aside for the moment and juice your current program, let's talk about how you can use me to raise more money for all of my endeavors. So that was the first thing I saw this morning at 9:08. It was like, wow, it's pretty powerful. And I've got a few emails like that um, from folks that I didn't expect to, hear from in that capacity, right? And that's the community building.
Yeah, we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different outcome. And yes, I just paraphrased Alcoholics Anonymous is the insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Is that truly the origin of that?
Well, as far as I can tell, and I did about a week's worth of research on it because it used to be attributed to Einstein, but he actually never said it.
Mm.
And so I had to go find out who did say it because I don't like to put up things that I haven't researched and found it out. And as far as I can tell, the origin is actually Alcoholics Anonymous.
Got you. Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense when you're talking about people who have an addiction to alcohol and continue to do the same thing. And I've heard the same thing in drug addiction is if you go through treatment, you go through the program, and then you go back and do the same things you were doing before, you're going to get the same results.
I don't know how old AA is, but it seems like that's been around.
A
That
very long
thing's been
time.
around a lot longer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think I remember reading this, and please somebody fact check me on this because I don't have my information in front of me. But AA has been around since at least the 1920s, from my understanding. So this is, it's been around a while. But the point is that we have to change the way we do things. And um, blatantly, I believe that our culture is toxic to our humanity. And we are working to change that with each other. Because one of the ways we reprogram our toxic culture is by coming together and deciding on what needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a piece of that puzzle. Even people you don't agree with have a piece of it, and you'll find you agree with them more than you don't. And if you listen to their piece, it might fit into something else that you're thinking that you wouldn't have realized otherwise. And then you'll have a different approach to it.
Right.
Marwan and I do this all the time. I mean, we absolutely do not think the same way.
Wow,
and,
man.
and as much as we agree on stuff, it took 2 years to come to that point. So,
Well, again, and that's the relationship building, right? That's the true sense of relationship can turn into community, right?
yes, it is. It just you have to be willing to take the time to do it and be patient about it.
Well, because there's a level of trust that has to be established, right?
Yep.
Uh, being actually intellectually honest, not having conversation, to out of the point to win and just make your point, right? You want to be heard, you don't want to listen. There's so many pieces to that, and being
Winning
intentional
is
on
when everybody thrives.
yeah, but being intentional on improving relationships with each other, right? That has to be an intentional thing. You can't go into it like, oh, okay, I'll just come on over here, see what this is about, right? Well, you know what? It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to find a perfect organization, a perfect group of people that think exactly how you do. And some of those things, there might be some real hard sticking points where you're really diametrically opposed with that person, right? And we all have our hard lines, but as you said, right, you've got some things that I definitely don't agree with, and vice versa. But we've decided to put those things to the peripheral and focus on the big piece in the middle, and that's really what it is, right? You've got this big plate of food over here, right, where we all agree, and we want to look at the few peas over in the corner and say, man, I hate those peas. We can't do anything together.
Yeah, and I love those people. I'm lying.
But I mean, that's really what
Yeah.
it is, right? That's all we can see is the few peas over there in the corner. But you don't see any other stuff in the middle. Look at that juicy steak. Look at those delicious potatoes.
Yep.
Look at those great veggies over there. But those
Absolutely.
peas.
Oh,
Oh,
and just a complete non sequitur. If you guys all have Netflix, you should watch. You should see if you can find. I think it's Netflix, and I'll verify it next week. That Gabriel Iglesias, the comedian known as Fluffy, does a tour of when he does a concert tour. He gets it together with his fans, and they tell him when he goes to a city what place to go eat at, and then he meets them there and has food, and then he goes someplace in that same city to work out after the food to do that. And some of them are hysterical, but some of the places he's found and the people he's talked to is amazing. So he's building community with his fan base in a very real way. And lover or hater, Taylor Swift does the same thing. They build community with their fans. And we just want you to build community with your neighbors.
well.
Actually, we need you to.
So when can they come down to Cups? Because that's their next opportunity to do that with us.
10 o'clock on Sunday morning.
10 o'clock Sunday morning. Let me type that here in the chat.
Cups Cafe.
Cups Cafe. Where are they located?
They are on 4th and Pacific.
4th and Pacific.
And there's a great bookstore right across the hall. And a vinyl shop just inside the same building.
So that's where we will be this Sunday, 10 a.m. Cups Cafe on 4th and Pacific. Excellent coffee. I had a dirty chai there, which is now my new favorite drink. Man, it was delicious. They have some great desserts. I believe they even have like sandwiches and things like that.
They have gluten-free sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they have good food. The people there are phenomenal, and we love going there to talk to folks.
Yeah, they're friendly for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
So come on down. Love to get to know you a little bit, chat it up, build community.
Absolutely. And if you have questions for us, you want to tell us we're crazy, you want to have a deep conversation, join us. We're free and open to doing that.
Well, we have about 1 more minute before the show ends, and I need to ask you some questions. A few that I have is, one, how is our board members' yard coming?
They have just actually next Thursday, at early morning, I think 9 o'clock. 4 of us are going out there to start the sheet mulching project, which is
Okay.
basically a process of setting it up for growing next year.
Now, my other question is, it has gotten a bit cold early, right? We hit freezing before Halloween, which is crazy. My greenhouse is up. I really need to get something planted in there.
Okay.
What can I plant, and when can we try to get it done? Because we're losing the light, we're losing it all.
So, are you planning to do raised beds? Are you planning to try and grow in the ground?
I probably raised beds might be easier.
Okay,
Have
so
more control.
so the first thing you should probably do is consider composting. The reason I say that is because it is going to get cold, and you don't want to run a heater in the greenhouse, right? So what you do is you build compost bed in there, or you have a compost pit in there, which is usually one of the raised beds for composting, and
Is it
it
going to be
creates.
stinky?
Well, it's certainly not going to be. It will break down fairly quickly, but you're going to have fruit flies, but the thing is, as soon as it starts heating up, it will heat up the inside of the greenhouse and allow you to grow.
Sir, you're like a politician. You did not answer the question.
It depends
You
on what
danced all around that one.
it depends on what you have in it. Our compost smells a little bit, but then again, we have all kinds of things in there.
I know, but that's all I wanted you to say is like,
Yeah.
it's a compost, man. It's gonna have a little.
It's a
little odor
compost
to it.
heap, yeah.
If
But
you're
as it breaks,
downwind,
it
ready.
breaks down, it creates heat, and as it creates heat, it allows you to grow.
Great. All right. Potatoes, probably. You thinking?
If I were going to grow in a greenhouse during the winter, I'd find a way to supplement the heat in there, and I would grow herbs because you can't get them you can't grow them during the winter, and herbs make everything better.
Gotcha. Well, and I need something that's resilient against me
Yeah.
because I can kill some things.
Yeah, well, all of us can if we're not paying attention to it. So, yeah, but I'm not the one. I'm not the one with the green thumb. I'm the one that helps bring things together. But why don't you swing by on Thursday morning and talk to Crystal?
All right, Thursday morning, Matthews Yard, 1116. I would say private message, Resilient Ecosystems on Facebook. If you want to participate on there, many hands make light work, and it's a lot more fun with more people.
Yes, it is.
And that's another way to meet too, right?
And another project on the list is we're talking to Westside Improvement Center because they have a garden in the very front. There's some things we have to overcome about water and such, but we may be taking that one on to create a food forest in that in a near neighborhood.
Nice. I love it. All right. So if you want to see us this Sunday, Cups Cafe, 10 a.m. And then the following Thursday, up at one of our board members' houses,
Yes.
Matthews Yard. And again, reach out through Resilient Ecosystems for more.
Yeah, or just message me from the Kitsap Resiliency Project on Facebook.
There we go. You had a final word today?
Let's get it done, folks. Just that simple. Let's get it done. Let's come together.
Right. That sounds like the final word. Get her done. Get her done. All right. So again, another fantastic show. I appreciate you as always, my friend. Episode number 89, episode 90 next week. We are chugging along here.
It's going to be about the economy too.
Hey, that should be a good one. It should be a barn burner. We will be back at 5 p.m. For City Council. It is budget time, so it's a super important time to get involved to understand where our city is intending on spending our money. And this is your time to weigh in before that budget gets finalized. So for Mark Boatwright Frost, I am Marwan Cameron. This is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. You're watching The Conduit. We'll see you in a couple hours. Bye, everybody.